Well, they actually did it. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. So, in what is the biggest news I have ever relayed on this channel, probably might be the biggest news I will ever relay on this channel, and that is that the Cleveland Browns have actually done it. It is official. They have traded Myles Garrett, future Hall of Famer, first ballot Hall of Famer, best pass rusher of his generation, in my opinion, best pass rusher of all time. In my opinion, most talented Cleveland Brown to ever play, most talented player to ever wear the jersey. You can argue greatest and all that stuff with accomplishments, but if we're just talking about the player and the talent, best player to ever wear brown and orange, Myles Garrett has been traded to the LA Rams for Jared Verse, a 2027 first round pick, a 2028 second round pick, and a 2029 third round pick, which I do not love the compensation. We will get into that. But of course, first and foremost, just trying to soak in just the idea that, the actual fact that Myles Garrett has been traded, is no longer a Cleveland Brown. First and foremost, as I've done with lesser players, shall we say, I will always do, and I will obviously do the same for Myles Garrett. First and foremost, just absolute massive shout out to Myles Garrett, a massive goodbye to Myles Garrett. Of course, very sad to see Myles go. This is my favorite non-LeBron Cleveland athlete of all time, to be honest. I've not shied away from how much I love Myles Garrett, how much affirmation I have for Myles Garrett, how much I just appreciate Myles Garrett, everything that he has done. Here in Cleveland, being just the best defensive player on the planet. It's quite, we got to experience it as Cavs fans, having LeBron James, but not some teams go arguably forever never experiencing that, having the best player in the world either at their position or in some cases. I mean, with Patrick Mahomes not being the last season or so not being the Patrick Mahomes, there's an argument that this is the best player in the NFL. This is easily the best defensive player in the NFL. And as I said, some teams never get to experience having that or seeing that on their team. We got to obviously see it with the Cavs, with LeBron. We got to see it with the Browns, with Myles Garrett. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Just an absolute pleasure to watch Myles every Sunday. Watch the best at his position do it. Just an absolute joy to watch. I've got the jersey behind me. Thankfully, it's the signed jersey, so I've got an excuse to keep the Myles Garrett jersey up. I'd have done it anyway, but maybe after a year or so, people would have been going, well, Ollie, I think it's time to put the Myles Garrett jersey down. No, it's fine, because I've actually got Joe Thomas and quite a few other signatures on there, and I can use that as my excuse to keep the Myles Garrett jersey up. But, as I said, cannot stress enough how much appreciation I have, how much love, admiration I have for Myles Garrett. Just so thankful that I got to watch him play in the prime of his career. Got to watch him play for the Cleveland Browns. I've watched his I've watched every single game live that Myles Garrett has played in his career. So that is just, and I'm very grateful for that. That will no longer continue because obviously the Rams playing on the West Coast, time frame over here, with that obviously being in the UK a little bit later on, and they're going to be every prime time game this year. With obviously, I think they already had the most or tied for the most or second most. Now they get Myles. All those later ones that they can get flexed will get flexed. They'll probably have 15 prime time games this year on that West Coast time zone. There's no way I'll be staying up for that. So my streak of seeing every single Myles Garrett game live will come to an end, unfortunately. But as I said, it was an absolute hell of a ride, absolute joy to be able to witness it firsthand, and even get to see, obviously, last season in London, get to see Myles up close in person. I'm glad that we waited to this year to trade him and didn't do it last year, and I got to experience that as well. So, really, really, really grateful. It sucks, it stings. This is my favourite player, favourite Browns player of all time, to be honest. So this is obviously going to take a little bit of getting used to. It's going to sting, it's going to suck. But the Browns made that adjustment in the contract a month or so ago, whenever it was, and I know a lot of people wanted to say, well, there's no chance they were trading him, but I just had it in the back of my mind after that I just kind of thought and somewhat knew it was coming. Not that I not knew it was coming, but had it in my mind. I think it's more than likely at this point. I think we're over the 50% threshold. Try to push away from that and try and deny it. But as I said, I if this was just out of the blue, I'd be sat here crying right now. But as I said, we had last year, obviously, what we went through with the trade request. That kind of softens the blow a little bit, I suppose, because you're kind of like, okay, well, he didn't want to be here, kind of thing. It was obvious that the reason why he took that trade request away was because of the contract that they gave him. Even me as Myles' biggest fan is not going to sit here and try and convince anyone that no, it's because he loved Cleveland so much. It was obviously the contract that they gave him, and obviously it's been a year-long process going up to this year. With that change that they made in the contract, moving some of the money around, that would have made it a lot easier to trade Myles. Obviously, not seeing Myles all off season, which, don't get me wrong, that wasn't a problem for me, but just all that kind of stuff adding up does make it a little bit easier to stomach than, as I said, if this was just out of the blue, I would be sat here on my camera crying my eyes out for all of you guys to see. So, as I said, first and foremost, that's what always has to be stated. This is, in my opinion, the most talented, best player to ever wear brown and orange. Just an absolute joy to watch him play. Best defensive player on the planet, arguably the best player on the planet. NFL single season sack record holder, 122 and a half sacks, I believe, for the Cleveland Browns, franchise record holder. So, I don't think we'll ever see I don't think we'll ever see a player of Myles' ability at his position. Hopefully I'm wrong, and hopefully we do get that at quarterback more so than any other position. But Myles is that good, and that's not even to say that the Browns will never be successful or the Browns will never win anything. That's just how fucking good Myles Garrett is. This is a once-in-a-generation player. So, maybe I will never see a player as good as Myles Garrett play for the Browns again. Maybe I will, who knows, but that's just how good he is. So, obviously, sucks. And then, let's move on to the compensation side of it, which also puts a stinger in it as well, because, a lot of people, I think this is quite mixed on this. I mean, I've got my brother who I think's texted me twice so far this year. Literally probably texted me more times in the last hour than he has in the last probably 5 years. Texting me, trying to convince me that this is a good trade, that the Rams made the worse side of the deal, and that the Browns came away with a really good deal here. I've got other friends, Browns fans, trying to convince me that this is a really good deal. I think this is quite split down the middle. But I let me just first start by saying that with all of the trades, that I get it. We're at this point now. Myles is 30. As I said earlier, with all that trade, the trade request last year, what we're trying to do. This was the best time that you can do this. You either do it now, or you hold on, and it probably gets ugly, and it doesn't. You get nowhere near the company. It just doesn't look as good or work out as good. If you were going to do it, if you were going to trade Myles Garrett, this was the time to do it. Now was the perfect opportunity to do it. I've said this before. I'm more often than not against trading your best players, purely because you're never going to get the same caliber of player back. Most teams piss picks away anyway. So I'm not one of these people that is on social media basically campaigning for my team to trade their best players. I will never ever do that. But as with that being said, if they were going to do it, as I said, this was the time to do it. If you're gonna strike when the iron's hot, and obviously that's what they felt like. But as I said, with the compensation, I'm not amazed by it. I mean, don't get me wrong, getting Jared Verse back makes it stomachable, because if that was like if it was just the picks, obviously, laughable. Getting Jared Verse back helps. I mean, getting a really good player back helps, because when you just get picks back, it can be kind of annoying having to wait on a draft pick to hopefully make it look like the trade was worth it somewhat. So when you get a really good player back straight away that you can see and hopefully be impactful and hopefully be great for you as early as next season and obviously into the future, that obviously makes it a little bit easier to stomach. You get a year earlier getting to watch what you got, what present you got back for swapping your present. You get to unwrap that and see what that looks like straight away, rather than having to put it under the tree for a year and wait to see what it is while they're playing with your present that you just gave them all year round while you're waiting for yours. So it does help getting a good player back, and this is a really good player. And don't get me, I don't so when I stress about this compensation and I say this isn't enough, I don't want to downplay Jared Verse in any shape or form. This is a really, really good player. Only 2 players in the NFL have more pressures since he entered the league in 2024. That is Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons. So this is a very good player. The sacks don't. I think he's 7.5 sacks last year. So the sacks don't always look as gaudy as what the pressure numbers are. But in terms of all the metrics and all the metrics that if you're going to sit here as a Cleveland Browns fan and now deny that we've all been arguing and using for Myles Garrett, especially in the TJ Watt debates, you look at those similar metrics: pass rush, win rate, pressures, all of that stuff. Jared Verse is arguably a top 10 pass rusher on a rookie deal. So this is a very, very good player they are getting back. This isn't just like a decent player. This is a very, very good player they are getting back. You can make an argument whether or not Jared Verse is worth a first-round pick. Probably is, I suppose. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe not, but maybe fringe. So, you can maybe argue it is 2 first-round picks they are getting, but I just feel like when you're trading the best defensive player on the planet, the best player in franchise history, one of the best passer, one of the 3, right? However you want to do it, one of the 3 best pass rushers to ever grace the earth, and you're only getting back on paper Jared Verse and the 30th pick in the draft next year, that just seems like bullshit. That just doesn't even remotely feel like enough value. You can throw in the second round pick for 2028, by the way, not even a 2027 second round pick, a 2028 second round pick. But then you get to the 2029 third round pick, and I'll be honest, that just almost feels like a joke at that point. Like, oh yeah, we'll throw in a 2029 third round pick for fucking Myles Garrett. So I would definitely would have liked to get more here. If they had got 2 firsts and Jared Verse, I would probably be sitting there going, I mean, don't get me wrong, as I said, I'm never for trading your best players. I'm never for trading my favourite player of all time. But I would be sat here going, well, I completely get it. Like, it's kind of hard to turn that down, even from that standpoint. But just getting 1 first back, it just doesn't feel like enough compensation for me. Maybe I can change my mind on that, seeing how good Jared Verse can be here. But, just first reaction, face value, just seeing it when it came in. It was first reported just Jared Verse and a first round pick and perhaps additional draft compensation. And I'm there going, well, 100%. If that was the case, I would have come on here not crying like I would have done if it was, as I was saying earlier, I'd have come on here breaking stuff. But getting obviously a second and a third, people can argue, they can do their calculator draft conversion stuff and say, well, a second and a third is technically a late first round pick. Obviously the first round pick we are getting is going to be a late round pick. They're probably going to be in the fucking Super Bowl next year, so it's going to be the 31st or 32nd pick in the draft, which is basically a second round pick. So when you kind of put it like that, you're getting Myles Garrett, you're giving away Myles Garrett for Jared Verse, the 30th pick in the draft, maybe the 60th pick in the draft. Hopefully they suck in 2 years' time after Matt Stafford retires, and that third round pick is the first pick in the third round draft, and that's the best that you're going to get from that. You never know. It is the NFL. Who knows? Matthew Stafford, I mean, don't get me wrong, I would never wish for the Browns pick to end up by via this route. But if Matthew Stafford gets injured for the season, you never know what can happen with teams in the NFL. Any given year is not a guarantee in the NFL. So you never know. Maybe I'm going to be on the biggest hate watch. Don't get me wrong. Go and win a ring in 2028, Myles. Please, you need a ring to add to that resume, because I think you're the best pass rusher of all time, but a lot of other people want to argue that you're not. Go win a ring, maybe get a Super Bowl MVP to go along with it. I think it'll be hard for most people to say you're not the best pass rusher of all time, if not the second best pass rusher of all time. But let's go and do that in 2028, because I am going to be on the biggest LA Rams hate watch in 2027, just praying that first round pick could at least get somewhere into the teens range, like just suck a little bit, have a somewhat of a bad year, and let's get that closer to the teens, and hopefully the Browns can package that with their pick and go up and get, I don't know, one of these fucking quarterbacks, and hopefully have a franchise quarterback to come out of trading the best player to ever play for your fucking franchise. It's hard for me. There's times here where I might end up going on a tangent if I don't stop myself, because again, they've traded my favourite player of all time. I'm obviously annoyed about it. I don't love the compensation. But I say all of that, and as I used to do, I used to do these with my videos. I stopped doing it because, even being a Browns fan as long as I have been, which is nowhere near as long as, a lot of the faithfuls over there in Cleveland is bad enough. But just talking about the Browns on this channel for as long as I have, even that became too much for me to keep doing the positive spins. But I used to always finish my video on a positive note. That was kind of my thing that I like to do. And I suppose I'll finish this one off by trying to spin the positives of this Myles Garrett trade, which just does sound funny to say out loud in my head. Any trading Myles Garrett positive, that doesn't seem like two words that exist in the same universe. But you're getting Jared Verse back, as I mentioned earlier. This is a very, very good player. Like, this is a 25-year-old, arguably top 10 pass rusher. He's never going to be Myles Garrett. That's because no one is ever going to be Myles Garrett. No one in the league currently, no one coming out of the draft in the next 5 fucking years is going to be Myles Garrett. Let's just accept that already. But Jared Verse is a very, very good player to get in return. You get a younger edge rusher that fits your timeline, shall we say. Nobody thinks the Browns are competing this year. You get Jared Verse in. Hopefully, as I said, with the 2 first-round picks next year, maybe you can hopefully finally get a quarterback, and obviously, you're ready to go with a younger team. Everywhere around Myles was getting younger. And it's kind of like Myles was still there, and I suppose you could argue Denzel as well, which I'm sure we'll be doing a fucking video on Denzel Ward getting traded in the next couple of weeks or months or going into the season, depending how it goes. But I'll leave that for when we get to that. But as I said, everyone's getting younger around Myles, and I kind of said earlier this was the best time to do it in terms of the value we're going to get for him, and this was also the best time to do it in terms of he's at that very edge of like, this is the prime of this is his peak at 30. Does he drop off a cliff after 32? I don't think so, but there are those kind of question marks. So you bring in Jared Verse, who is 25, kind of fits your time frame a little bit better in terms of like this kind of rebuild, retool, whatever you want to call it. You completely overhauled the offense, brought in a lot of young players, a lot of young skill players. Pretty much all the skill position talent on this team is like 22 years old. So, it's a pretty young team, and you get younger at that spot. That Jared Verse is going to be your premier edge rusher now going into the future. He is the Myles Garrett, which is a shame for Jared Verse, and that is one thing I want to say as well, because he's forever going to have to live in Myles Garrett's shadow now, and that's unfortunate for him. He doesn't deserve that, but that is always going to be the case. Everything he does now in Cleveland is going to be associated with the fact that he came in to replace Myles Garrett. So that does obviously that sucks for him, because as I said, you're never going to be Myles Garrett. Nobody is. So that is obviously unfortunate. But as I said, he is going to be your premier pass rusher for the next couple of years, foreseeable future. And obviously, you bring that in on a younger guy that obviously you could argue somewhat fits your time scale more. Obviously, Myles did last year sign, at the time, biggest non-quarterback contract in NFL history. The Browns will now pretty much entirely be off that from 2027 now. Trading Myles means that the Rams pick up his entire salary next season, his entire salary onwards. The Browns now are just basically have to pay the dead cap that they've owed from the last few seasons, obviously with the money they've been pushing back with the restructures and obviously with the way that they structured the deal. I think that's 41 million in dead cap, which now, because it is post June 1st, I'm assuming this deal officially gets signed after what, as of recording, I think in about 40 minutes time, 4 p.m. Eastern time, I believe, is when the official June 1st designation goes over, and that will be split into 2 years, which is 15 million in 2026 and whatever's left, 25 million, 26 million left in 2027 of dead cap, which might sound like a lot now, but it's actually not that bad. And this was the kind of whole thing with when the Browns did kind of move that money around, because if they didn't do that, this would have looked fucking horrendous. This would have been like 90 million in dead cap. Then now it's only 41 million in dead cap, split over 2 years. And obviously you're getting Jared Verse back on a rookie contract. And by the time that his rookie contract is up and, you have to pay him and that kicks in, all of the Myles Garrett money will be off the books. So that, the timeline does match there with the money. And as we always say, follow the money. So it's one of those things that they get off obviously a lot of the money. You get a younger player, you get some picks. I get it. I don't love it. Don't get me wrong. This is me trying to convince myself here. We just traded away my favourite player and didn't get even what I believe is fair compensation for Myles. But at the end of the day, that was the issue with trading Myles, and that was kind of the part of the reason why, the last year or so I've been saying it's not something I would be that interested in doing, because you're just never going to get the value back. Myles is worth 3 first-round picks, but what team is giving up 3 first-round picks for a 30-year-old pass rusher? It's just not going to happen. That's why it felt just completely untenable, felt so unlikely a year ago, obviously when he signed that contract, etc., etc. But then, fast forward to this off-season, they made the change in the thing. It does feel, somewhat, it felt a lot more likely, shall we say, and obviously it turns out not just likely, but actuality, and it happened, and Myles Garrett has been traded. It still feels mad to say, I'm going to be completely honest. Myles has been traded, as I said at the start, just an absolutely crazy thing to think about. But, just a crazy thing, and it's happened. But, I'm glad that it's been done behind the doors. Like, I'm sure Myles has been pushing for this, and he obviously learnt from last year, shall we say, that doing it publicly and the way that he did it probably wasn't the best way to do it. But obviously, they've done it in a more courteous way this year, a more moving in silence way this off season, and they've kept this quiet. And obviously, they finally come to a resolution. I don't think this. That's another thing as well. When people, I could moan about the compensation, but this isn't an Andrew Berry doing trying to get as many picks as he can and offering Myles Garrett out on a fish hook and saying how many picks can I get and trying to get as many picks as he could. I don't think that's what this was at all. This was clearly a fork in the road for both Myles and the Browns. There was clearly looked like there was no way of them going forward together. Obviously, this all happened behind closed doors, I'm sure. And the Browns felt like they were in a position where they probably had to move on from Myles Garrett. They made that change in the contract. I'm sure that's when the Rams started, making their phone calls. And funnily enough, the Rams were the only other team that were up for trading picks 5 years in the future. So, if that had got passed, then maybe we'd have got slightly a little bit better compensation, because they'd have been more willing to give up more 5 years down the line than 3 years down the line. But I'll probably do another video on this, maybe another 100 videos, I don't know. But this is just kind of my first initial reaction. As I said, it's Myles Garrett. I'm going to miss him. He's the best player to ever wear brown and orange, in my opinion. I don't love the compensation. Yes, I can say about the money and all of this stuff, like lining up, but at the end of the day, when the Myles money comes off, you don't have to pay Jared Verse. The way that the market's going, if he plays as good as he's been playing the first 2 seasons in his career, he's probably getting 40 million a year, which is what you're already paying Myles. So you're giving up Myles and the same amount of money for Jared Verse and the 30th pick in the draft doesn't sound that great when you word it like that. There's plenty of ways that you can word it where it doesn't sound that great, but there are ways you can word it where it sounds a little bit better. And as I said, you are getting Jared Verse back. You're getting another first-round pick in what is hopefully a very deep and good quarterback class next year. Fingers crossed. You get some more picks, second round and a third round pick, and you get a player that maybe more fits your timeline as we finally can hopefully go through one of these rebuilds and it actually result in some deep playoff runs. And you never know. We see it so many times where teams trade great players on like not that great teams, and they finally get the move away, and that team actually turns out doing quite well. I mean, we've just seen PSG win back-to-back Champions League, trophies after selling Kylian and Mbappe and being essentially forced to sell Kylian and Mbappe to Real Madrid, one of the best players in the world, best young player in the world at the time, and they went on to win two Champions Leagues. So sports is a funny thing. You never know. Maybe the Browns trade Myles and they go up and win a Super Bowl in the next 5 years. You just never know. But is that cope? Probably. That's where we're at, guys. It might be a painful season. We're staring down the barrel of maybe Deshaun Watson starting with a team with no Myles Garrett on it. And I will just finish off by saying that a lot of people wanted to kind of discredit Myles sometimes and say, well, the defense is great anyway, and especially with Jim Schwartz and all of that stuff. Is it even Myles that's the reason why they're so good? And I will just say that we are quickly going to learn that this defense was built on sinking sand now that Myles is gone, because Myles was basically the defense, and a lot of players were able to look as good as they were because of the attention that Myles Garrett took away from them. So I expect the defense to take an absolutely massive step back next season, and that limits the Browns. I think where we were kind of at, and I'll do another video on this in terms of like where to go from here and maybe how does this affect the Browns season. But just to quickly touch on that, I think that this definitely completely brings down the ceiling for the Browns next season, and obviously the floor as well. You looked at next season where it's like, okay, we got some hopefully potential new skill position players, some new talent on offense. Just get some somewhat decent QB play, go with pretty good defense, and you get 6, 7, 8 wins. Don't expect the defense to be pretty good now. You never know, maybe it is, but I don't expect them to be anywhere near as good, and with what is probably going to be a very struggling offense, at least early on. Even with the easier schedule, I think that route for the Browns to win a lot of games has probably decreased dramatically. But is that the worst thing? Because if it results in a quarterback in 2027, it'll be a long year, guys. But we're Browns fans. We've done it before. We've sat and waited before. We've sat and waited our whole lives for this. So hopefully one day we can get it. And if trading Myles Garrett is what it takes, then fuck it, I'm down for it. Even though he's my best, my favorite player of all time. But as I said, I'm going to do another video on this, maybe multiple other videos on this and kind of different angles and what it means for the Browns, etc., etc. This was just my initial thoughts as me. I was making my dinner and my phone rang with my friend telling me it had happened. So I literally got the news while making my dinner. Still trying to accept it, take it all in. But that's just my thoughts. As I said, straight off the bat. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments. Are you happy about this? Are you upset about this? Do you think this is a good deal? Do you think this is a bad deal? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments. But as I said, that would do it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you do enjoy my content, then please drop this video a like, hit that subscribe button. It's free, but it really, really helps out my channel. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. As I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans, and even if that means I only get to talk to one fan a day, I'm happy because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have a good week with no Myles Garrett, I suppose, and getting clowned on by national media and every other NFL fans that are going to laugh at us for not getting for trading away our best player. Enjoy that as much as you can. Myles, thank you so much. But most importantly, as always, go Browns.